with composer Reinhold Heil, who has established a notable collaborative history with fellow composer Johnny Klimek, as well as director-composer Tom Tykwer. The trio have worked on a number of notable films, such as Run Lola Run, The International, and most recently Cloud Atlas, which earned them a Golden Globe nomination for Best Score. Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So you are part of a very notable team, a unique team that I've never seen such a collaboration, I think, anywhere else in the industry. And I think that a director who also composes and works with two composers and they're all composers all together, is fascinating. How, with this relationship that you guys have together, all three of you, what is the working process like if you're on a film? Do you split up duties? Do you lock yourselves in a room together and force yourselves to work together? Or does it change kind of depending on the film?
Yes, the method is pretty straightforward. It's based on Tom's schedule and Tom's philosophy about how to apply music to a film and how it's not applied after the fact. It actually grows organically with the screenplay and with the edit of the film. So of course he's always the author. Like even with Cloud Atlas, he is the co-writer of the screenplay together with the Wachowskis. He's also the co-director. He oversees every aspect of the movie, so he can't focus completely on the music. That's
Right.
what Johnny and I are for. But of course, he's also really deeply involved in the creation of the music, and he is a very strong believer of writing the music before the film is even shot, so that no other music needs to be used as temp music when the film gets edited.
Wow.
That's it. We're not the only ones who are thinking this way, but we're sort of hoping that this will, that the idea kind of spreads. I know that Hans Zimmer is doing this a lot. He's writing at least suites.
Right.
James Newton Howard, I saw him yesterday. He was speaking, and he said that's what he picked up from working with Hans on Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. He's doing this now also for his movies. He writes these 10, 12-minute suites of themes without having the picture. So when the picture is not even shot. The cool thing about it is the third party temp music is sort of eliminated, and not so much because that music would be bad, but simply our brains work in this way that if we've seen a piece of music with a movie scene with an image 100 times or 500 times as an editor or the director in the editorial, the two become one. Our brain just burned into our memory as a unit, and then listening to another piece of music to replace this temp is almost impossible. You have to then give it at least 10 listens to kind of compete with the 500 you had with the other piece of music. It's a totally normal phenomenon. Even if you are aware of it, you can't help it. Your brain just functions this way. So
Right.
that's the one problem. The other problem is an editor puts a piece of music temporarily on his edit, and he cuts to it. Well, that means the pacing of the scene is very, very strongly determined by that temp music, whether he wants it or not. He would cut to this piece of music, so then he's cutting to another piece of music, makes it even more difficult to replace that music with a new piece. Or it actually also gives the composer less possibilities. He will have to at least stick to the pacing of that original temp music piece, and to a degree with the character. So, I mean, while the phenomenon will never go away, and it actually also has its place. There's probably a million cases where doing it this very traditional way is exactly right. And I work with this situation all the time. It's totally fine. It's absolutely doable. But of course, for a filmmaker like Tom, who's a composer filmmaker, for him the music cannot be just put on top like the icing on the cake.
Right.
It's part of the flavor. It shapes the movie as much as it is being shaped by the movie. It's organically really molded into the whole thing. It's the way to go. So we rewrite before, when the screenplay is at a decent stage, we get together, and mostly we do this in Berlin because he's so involved in all the aspects of the filmmaking. If the film is produced mainly in Berlin or in Germany, in the case of Perfume, it was Munich. We go there, we write pieces with him, we come back, we develop them a little bit, and then we actually had, in the case of Cloud Atlas, in 2011, we worked through June and July of 2011, and at the end of this already had an orchestra session, and were writing and recording all this music, and then came back to Los Angeles, and while he shot the movie, developed it into all these suites. So it's not just one suite or two, it was a whole bunch. We sent him 3 hours of music for the edit while he was shooting. And of course, you know that while a movie is being shot, editors already put an assembly together. You know, it's officially called the assembly, but of course the editors put their heart into it. They want to shape the movie too, so they do their version of the movie. In this case, it was actually two editors. That's why I'm saying editors. They had a 4-hour version of the movie ready when it wrapped. And then, we were still busy here with the television series, but Tom said, you have to come. He asked me to actually come over to Berlin the moment when they started editing, because the three of them, spent 12 hours in the editorial room, starting in January of 2012, to put this thing into a halfway manageable size. And of course, it's structurally a really complex thing to make it accessible and comprehensible.
Right.
So they wanted, of course, that all the temp music that we had developed wasn't going to cover all the bases. And there's no such thing as a music editor in the German movie industry, believe it or not. So the composer does that himself. So I had to go to Berlin and become the music editor / composer, arranger, and my team, Johnny and the rest of the team, were supporting me from here. Over the internet, and I didn't even have an assistant because the TV series, of course, needed also our full attention, and it was a hard stretch for 2 months that I was in Berlin and working there without an assistant, but down the hallway from the editorial where Lana and Andy Wachowski and Tom Tykwer were shaping the movie, and I was trying to serve them, with as much music as possible. And they set me deadlines because, of course, they had their internal little screenings.
Right.
So then, at some point, the whole team came to Berlin, and it became a little easier for me. But then we still we had yet another recording session in May of 2012, and then worked all the way through July. We brought it back here in July and did the final music mix here, but everything else actually happened in these provisionary studios that were on the same level as the editorial, and we had a room for the supervising sound editor. We had several rooms where the visual effects producers were, and it's just a very much a family experience. It's very unlike anything else that you get to experience when you work on a movie, and it's actually lovely because you get that sense of community with the editors and the visual effects guys.
Well, that's great. I mean, I love hearing that because just that way of working, I think, really reflects on the final product, and it just connects, I think, more with the audience. At least with me, it does. And my favorite director is Sergio Leone and Ennio Morricone. They did the same thing. They would compose the music beforehand, and then the movie and the music really becomes this entity together. So it's
and I hear it from Hans Zimmer. I saw a screening of Inception a few years ago,
right.
And it's there after the screening, and he told that that he and Christopher Nolan had walks at the beach, and they were already talking, and he was sketching out things and giving them to him in the early stages before the movie got shot. So maybe not everybody does it as excessively as we do it, but it makes perfect sense because don't be afraid of the music. The music is going to be powerful. If you're a filmmaker, just sometimes I have the feeling filmmakers are a little jealous because composer comes in at the end, does his thing and has so much emotional impact.
Right.
And you go, yeah, but just use us, use us, talk to us, let us help you. We serve. I mean, that's the thing. As a film composer, you are a servant of the project and of the film, and ultimately the filmmaker.
Right.
And you're not there in order to elbow anybody out. You want to use all your talent to help the film to be as good as it could possibly be, you know.
Hmm. So back, last year when Cloud Atlas came out, there was a lot of buzz surrounding the release. And in your own words, how would you describe the film to someone who doesn't know anything about it?
Yeah, this could, with my tendency of blabbering, this could get to a half-hour pitch. But let me try and do it as soon as an exercise. Okay,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to do it really briefly now. It's based on a novel by David Mitchell. The novel itself has an unusual structure because it has 6 different stories that happen in 6 different eras of history, starting in the mid 19th century, then another one in the 1930s, another one in the early 70s, one in present day, one in a dystopian future in 2144 in Seoul, and one in the 24th century after the end of the world, so to speak, when the people will have fallen back onto the level of the Middle Ages.
Hmm.
Um, and not only are these different places, different eras, and different people that we're talking about, we're also having different kind of treatments of the English language. Each one of those stories is a different genre of storytelling, of book writing, and has a different way of language, different kind of a language kink, so to speak, in the English language in each one of those. And the structure is, it tells the story, the first story, it stops in the middle of a sentence and you get really frustrated. You think that your book is broken. Actually, lots of people brought the books back to the bookstore and complained. And the second chapter starts and it jumps and it's an expose of a new story as if there has never been another story before. But at some point in that story, it relates to the first one because the book, the journal of the first one shows up in the second story. And the same thing happens over and over again. So you have the story of the 2 composers in 1930 and the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing that happened in 1850, which is the first story, is a little part of it. Then you jump into, it also gets interrupted frustratingly in the middle, and it jumps to 1973 in San Francisco, and it's a political thriller. And the Cloud Atlas Sextet, which is a piece that one of these composers in 1930 writes, becomes a little side subject matter of that. So every story relates to the other, although it's completely set somewhere differently and it's a completely different genre. Then it jumps to the present day. It's a screwball comedy in London, and it jumps then to the future, this dystopian future in Korea, where we have corpocracy and no longer democracy. It's and then to the post-apocalyptic story. That's the one that's told in its entirety, and only then do you get the rest of story 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And when you're done reading the book, somehow the whole thing kind of merges in your brain. Obviously, that wasn't going to be the structure of the movie. Although I'm not sure if that's so obvious, but that's what Tom Tykwer and the Wachowskis came to at some point after reading the book over and over again, conceptualizing. They said they're going to have to lay out the 6 stories at the beginning, but then it's going to have to be cut between those 6 different stories. And at the end, it has to merge into one. You will have to have the feeling as the moviegoer that you've seen one story, although it comes from all these different eras and that they are all connected. And there's a lot of love put into the structure, how the transitions happen. It's the framing, it's the way the actors show up in the different stories and so on and so on. There's a lot of economic reason for it. Of course, you have a certain ensemble at your disposal. You don't have 6 ensembles, and so on and so on. So the music, of course, trying to somehow do justice to that, but at the same time not separate the stories as much as actually become the glue of all this material and help guide the viewer along in terms of the dramatic and emotional curves, because they are actually synchronized. If you jump from a situation that is dangerous in one story to another story, you will be at a dangerous moment there. And that gives the music the chance to stay the same where everything else completely changes. And that kind of is a very, very important aspect of keeping the unity of the 6 stories into that one film that is Cloud Atlas.
Mm-hmm. Which I was almost answered my next question, but I was going to ask the goal. What was the goal musically for the film, and how did you approach it? I mean, you're kind of trying to streamline everything together, but what was like what would, when you first approached the project? What did you want the music, the goal to
Well,
be?
yeah, the obvious thing I just already said, because it has to be the glue between those stories, and of course at the same time you're dealing with all these different eras. So we set out to do both. We set out to write music that is kind of related to the different eras of the stories of the book, and at the same time make them in a way that they can be unified, that they can be used at any given time in the film. And I think we had to let go of really scoring properly every aspect of the film, because the style of the score would have to be jumping sometimes every few seconds, and that didn't make any sense. So we understood that pretty much from the get-go, that there would be moments of the film that if you looked at them separately, if you look at like 20 seconds of the movie by itself, you could potentially listen to the music and say that music doesn't make any sense with this film. But if you see the scene before and the scene after, you go like, oh, okay, I understand why the music is doing this, because it's kind of keeping a momentum that's going in the other story that's currently not seen. So actually, the music also helps to keep the other stories alive while we're not seeing them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
I hope I'm kind of making sense. So that the other story of the momentum, maybe the drama, maybe the danger of the other story that we just left is still palpable. The music helps doing that. Music is actually the only thing that can do that. So we just, we're trying not to stress out over it too much when we start writing, because that just inhibits the creative process. So you
Right.
just work from a place of fun and saying, "Wait, this is awesome! Nobody's ever done this, and we get to do it. All right, it's scary, but let's jump right in and write stuff." And so we wrote a whole bunch of themes. We struggled the most with the Cloud Atlas Sextet because it was described in the book, and that's always difficult. It's
Mm-hmm.
a piece of music described with words. Is coming out of this the time of the 1930s, where in the 1930s you have these two composers, and one of them writes this, for the time, pretty avant-garde piece of chamber music, and it calls it Cloud Atlas Sextet, and then it goes on in the future eras to be forgotten, and then emerging again, and then in the future actually becoming a ubiquitous piece of music that everybody on the planet knows. And that was kind of a hard combination of criteria to reconcile, to then write a piece of music out of, which is why at some point we just abandoned the avant-garde chamber music aspect of it and said, let's just write a beautiful melody that people can relate to, and then orchestrate it in so many different ways. And that's what we did. It's omnipresent. The little melody is omnipresent everywhere. There are basically three main musical themes. One of them is the sextet, although the sextet as a piece doesn't show up very often as a complete composition. It shows only on a few rare occasions in the movie. But in terms of the melody, is almost in every cue. And the same goes for the Atlas March, which is sort of a big, sort of epic, emotional piece that starts out very small and becomes bigger and bigger, sort of like the bolero, is never in the film really, in that uh, in that arrangement, except for in the end. It goes into the end title. It starts out at the very last scene and then kind of dominates the end title. And then there's a third piece which is we called it Eternal Recurrence. Actually, Lana Wachowski called it that. We had a different title. We had the title Monosome, and she said, well, that's more like Eternal Recurrence, and it had to do with the way they actually used it in the film. It's always used, it's sort of a mid-tempo but pushing forward motoric kind of riff of bass notes, that pops up whenever the story is propelled forward. And major changes occur in the lives of the people in all these stories. And
Hmm.
it plays on montages where it jumps from one to the other, and you have a voiceover and you have that piece going underneath. So those are the three main elements, and they pop up everywhere, everywhere. It's just insane how consistently the themes get used. And actually, I'm kind of thrilled to look back at that we actually managed to finally do this, because I was always complaining that we are writing too many themes, and we, instead of concentrating on less thematic core elements and using arrangement to shape them and to serve the movie, we just wrote new pieces. If you look at Perfume, the story of a murderer, it's a movie that wasn't very successful here, although it was very, very successful in other parts of the world. A big epic movie with a big orchestral score and about 8 or 9 main themes. They had maybe a little core motive of like a semitone, which you could say that connects them all, but not
Hmm.
really. They're all like really different themes. And in this case, we come away with like 3 main musical ideas that really shape the entire score. Even if you look at a piece like um, what is it called? Edinburgh. It's at the beginning of the film. It sounds
Uh-huh.
like a classic, almost like a piece from an English art house movie. You have the musical structure of the Cloud Atlas Sextet, the melodic lines of the Cloud Atlas March, and then woven in, there's even the Eternal Recurrence is already in a very playful little piano melody. Um, Traveling to Edinburgh is the piece, and all the 3 themes are already there. The same thing for the opening, which is also very much sort of a light-hearted kind of acoustic guitar with orchestra piece where you go like, this is supposed to be a sci-fi movie. Why are they playing this kind of music? Well, because it's not just a sci-fi movie. And the material is already in there. So, I mean, even in the beginning, when you're still kind of orienting yourself, what the hell is going on here? You can't really put your finger on it, but all your thematic material is already at work. And then even when it goes to 1973, the source music in the background is a piece of rock music, like it could have been from the late 60s, early 70s. And the riff that the guitar and the bass are playing is the Cloud Atlas Sextet melody. So if you go searching and digging, you will see this thematic consistency taken to great lengths. But we were seeing how, with how much love the filmmakers were constructing their transitions from one scene to the next, jumping from one story to the other story, to make them artfully beautiful and meaningful. And we said we can't possibly not do that with the music. So even if it's like a little piano in the background, at music, like music at Aurora House, where Cavendish goes and checks in, thinks it's a hotel, but it's actually some sort of an old people home where people are locked away by their families. It's actually a sort of a virtuoso version of a pianist playing the Cloud Atlas Sextet in some sort of impressionist kind of way. So, again, if you go digging, you will find those same melodies everywhere. There's hardly any third-party music in this film.
Hmm. I mean, it's amazing how much, yeah, detail and intricate levels and layers that you guys put into this, and it makes the listening experience so much richer. And but it's still not, it's not a complex score in terms of emotions. I think it really gets absorbed. I think, at least for me, while listening to it.
Well,
So
that's great to hear that that people get that. I mean, obviously, we wrote more music than what you have in the film. Where maybe some pieces I really really liked that were more like brain children conceptualized at the very beginning, and then even developed to a nice degree, but then the film just didn't want them.
mhm.
That's always the thing. Of course, if you proceed the way we do, you have to write more than you will actually end up needing at the end of the day. You have to give some options, and then you have to see what the filmmakers gravitate towards, and then of course the film itself. The film itself is a sort of a living being in
All
a
right.
way. I don't want to be too like scary or metaphysical about it, but you have the feeling that a piece of film can reject a piece of music, or just say, this is good, I'm absorbing it, and then it takes it. It
Right.
takes it or it rejects it. And it's, of course, the filmmaker himself, or in this case, the three filmmakers who play a huge part in it. But you can tell when you, like me, for instance, fulfill that role as a music editor, which I actually love. I love this because it kind of gives you so much perspective of like how music works with film and what doesn't work. When I sat there in January, I tried three different main themes to be the opening title. So, like within a few days, I was trying to construct the opening title three times in a completely different way, and I was super surprised which of the three versions the filmmakers ended up picking. I was like, really? This one? Okay.
Well, I mean, it's been so insightful sharing all this information, and I really hope people get a chance to find the film when it comes on home video. I know a lot of people didn't find it in theaters, and it's always sad to see something this immense and well made kind of slip under the radar. But hopefully people will give it a chance, and when it comes out on Blu-ray. But to wrap up, I always like to ask composers this one question: if you had the opportunity to compose any film ever made, with no disrespect to the original composer, which film would you choose?
I think it would either be Alien or Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I could like really wholeheartedly go back to the Bernard Herrmann age and not completely, just make it laughable. And this is already difficult with Alien because I think Goldsmith's score is just a timeless masterpiece there. I couldn't possibly think of touching it. I'm just saying that would be a movie I would have wanted to score for sure.
Uh-huh.
So it's one of my all-time favorite movies and one of my all-time favorite scores. It's just so, and then, I mean, I like Ridley Scott's movies, I always do. But, this was a period of 2, 3 years in which he just completely knocked it out of the park and opened up, genres in a way that I just find is still, still people don't follow him enough there, but I think it still opened up enough like good sci-fi. And I have to say, I mean, as much as that might be super entertaining, but I've grown a little bit tired of the alien race that tries to destroy us.
Mm-hmm.
So, this dystopian future or those things like, Alien, which, you can say Alien is definitely something that finds itself even in James Cameron's work. He was most certainly, I mean, obviously he directed the second one,
Absolutely, yeah.
so this is all good stuff. I think sci-fi needs to be relevant, needs to be relating to what we do.
Right.
This is what I liked about Cloud Atlas. That it actually puts our current wrongdoing in perspective of what this could lead to. And good sci-fi movies do that.
I just actually spoke with a composer. He was my most recent interview that I posted. Kevin Ripple. He did the video game for Aliens, Colonial Marines, and he was talking about how he was debating with himself whether he was going to touch, scores like Goldsmith and Horner, or
Right.
try to make something brand new for himself. And he had to do both. He had to reference a little bit of the material, but
Mm,
definitely make it into a new thing. And I thought that would have been a great journey for a composer that he took to
for
do
sure.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think on a video game, that's actually a cool way to deal with the subject matter without because it leaves you a little bit more freedom to,
Mm-hmm.
to work with it, and people will not compare the video games easily with the actual movie. So I think that's actually a really cool opportunity. I should check into that, although I'm not a big gamer. I get too addicted and then I don't work anymore and I need to work.
There's some great scores in video games. I'm continuously wowed by how composers manage to make some amazing work there. So,
Yeah,
but thank you so much, Reinhold, for your time. It's been absolutely amazing to talk about all this and all the information you've shared. So hopefully we get to do this again sometime in the future.
sure. Yeah, you have my contact. I'm not
Well,
going away. I'm here in Los Angeles.
okay. I'll be too. So if you,
Oh, actually, I forgot to do one. I forgot to plug my website. I really do
oh,
want
sure.
to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
that.
go ahead.
It's reinholdheil.com. Very simple. So
I'll,
there's some music there. You can check out some of the music that I've done, and I hope to update it soon. So we'll see.